Code Explained says hi. Today we're going to talk about HTML5 custom attributes, or what we call data attributes. So we're going to see how we can create a data attribute in HTML5, how we can access them using JavaScript and CSS. For the HTML syntax, the syntax is really simple. So when you create an element in HTML, like a div, a section, a header, a body, tag, or HTML, anything. So whenever you create an element, then here you can put your attributes. For example, when you say class and you set it a value container, class here is an attribute. When you set an ID equals to 1, the ID here is also an attribute. And when you say data columns, so your attribute here starts with data. In this case, this is what we call a custom attribute in HTML5. So whenever you want to create a custom attribute, it's easy. You just need to use the word data, then a hyphen or a dash, then the name of your custom attribute. And also you can use multiple words for your custom attributes. For example, you can say data, then a hyphen or dash, index dash number. Now let's go and see how you can access these data attributes using JavaScript. To access a data attribute value using JavaScript, you need first to select the element using query selector or any method you want to use. So I'm going to assign this to container. So now container represents this element here. Now container has two properties. One is called getAttribute and the other is called setAttribute. GetAttribute is used to get the value of the attribute, and setAttribute is used to change the value of that attribute. GetAttribute here gets in the full HTML name of the attribute. For example, I'm going to say class, this will return container. ID, this will return 1. Data columns, so I'm using here the full HTML name, this will return 5. So data index number, this will return 458. Now, when you use getAttribute, for example, if I pass in data columns, so this attribute here, I will get 5. But you need to know that 5 here is a string. So getAttribute will always return a value that is of type string. Now, to set attribute, you need to use the full HTML name of the attribute, for example, here data columns, and then I'm going to set it to 10. So this will change the value here to 10. And that's how you can use getAttribute and setAttribute. Well, we don't use getAttribute and setAttribute anymore, so you want to use this only if you want to support Internet Explorer 10 version and under. Now let's move on to the new way to access data attributes in JavaScript. Well, you still need to select the element using query selector or any method. I'm going to assign this to container. Now our container object here, which represents this element here, has a DOM string map, which is an object. It has all the data attributes inside. So you can see here columns and index number, this data attributes here. Now to access this DOM string map, you're going to need to use a property called dataset. So now in JavaScript, whenever you want to access a data attribute, a custom attribute, you need to select the element and then use dataset, the property dataset. And dataset here is an object, so you just need to say .columns to get the value of the attribute data columns here. So this will return 5 as a string for the type. And for those that have multiple words, you need to convert every dash to a common case. So this will be index number with capitalized N. And this code will return 458 as a string again. Now this is how you can read the values of your custom attributes using the dataset property. And if you want to change their values, you simply assign a value to the dataset, then the name of your custom attribute. Now let's move on and see how you can access the data attributes using CSS. Well, I will start here with some devs. So I have here our old dev with the class container, ID1, data columns, and data index number. Now I still need one other dev and then the third dev that doesn't have any data columns. So it just has the class and the ID. Now if I open this in a web browser, I will see a blank page. So let's add some content here. Let's say here first dev, second dev, and third dev. Now to access these data attributes using CSS, you can use the function or the built-in function attr, that stands for attribute. And then you need to pass in the full HTML name of the attribute. For example, let's say data columns or data index number, ID, or class. Now I'm going to assign this to the property content. And I'm going to select my devs here. And I'm going to add this content here after the devs content. So I'm going to use the pseudo element after. Now this will add this content after the devs content. So here I'm going to see 5. The data columns value here is 5. Here it's going to be 6. And here's going to be nothing. And that's how you can access the data attribute using the attr function in CSS. Now you can also select your elements using these data attributes. So if I say here background color is green and then select my dev, all the devs in my web page will now have a background color set to green. But if I use the attribute selector, some square brackets, and then my data columns, this is a custom attribute. Now only the devs that have that custom attribute data columns will have the background color set to green. And now if I set the width to 500 pixels for all the devs will have 500 pixels for the width. But if I use again the attribute selector, but this time data columns equals to 5, only the devs that their data columns custom attribute is equal to 5 will have 500 pixels for the width. So only the first dev here will have the width set to 500 pixels. And then if I use data columns equals to 6 and then set the width to 600 pixels, only the second dev here will have 600 pixels for the width. And that's how you can access your custom attributes using the attribute built-in function. And that's how you can select your elements using your custom attributes. And that's it for this tutorial. This is the end of it. I hope you learned something new and I hope you enjoyed the video. And before you go, don't forget to subscribe, comment, like, and share the video with your friends.